A 71-year-old man walked into a room last year and every head turned. Not because he was loud, not because he was rich, because he had something most men his age had already lost, and most men half his age never had to begin with: presence. Someone pulled him aside afterward and asked him straight, "What's your secret?" "Gym, diet, good genes." He smiled and said, "I stopped keeping company that costs me." That was it. No supplement stack, no skincare routine, no morning cold plunge. Just one decision made quietly, made firmly, about who he allowed to stay close. Now I want you to think about the people in your life right now. Not the ones you love, not your family. I mean the ones you tolerate, the ones you keep out of history, out of guilt, out of the fear of what they'll say if you pull away. Because I'm going to show you something today that most men discover far too late. Stay with me. Marcus Aurelius spent decades surrounded by people who needed something from him. Senators, generals, advisors, enemies wearing friendly faces. And in his private journal, the book we now call Meditations, he wrote something that most people skip past without realizing what it means. He wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit," not the first rule of war, not the first rule of leadership, the first rule of being a man. We'll come back to what that means because by the end of this, it's going to hit differently than you expect. 1. The one who borrows your energy and never pays it back. You don't need me to describe this person. You already felt something shift in your chest when I said it. There's a name, there's a face. Maybe there's even a phone number you've been meaning to stop answering. This person doesn't come to you with a knife. They come to you with problems. Endless, recycled, never-improving problems. And every single time you show up for them, every time you listen, every time you advise, every time you give, you walk away feeling like something was quietly taken from you. You just can't explain what. Here's what's actually happening. And this is where it gets interesting. Your body is keeping score even when your mind is making excuses. Every conversation with this person triggers a stress response. Cortisol floods your system. And cortisol, held at a low, chronic level over months and years, does something your mirror will eventually confirm whether you're ready to see it or not. But here's what I want you to sit with for now. Why do you keep answering? What is it that makes a man keep showing up for someone who takes and never refills? That answer matters. And we're going to get to it, but not yet. 2. The one who smiles to your face and shrinks you behind your back. This one is harder to spot because he's charming. He laughs at your jokes. He shows up at your events. On the surface, everything looks like friendship. But there's a pattern subtle enough that you've probably dismissed it a dozen times already. When you share good news, something flickers behind his eyes before the congratulations come. When you're in a group, your ideas get a half-second less respect than everyone else's. When you succeed, he finds the angle that diminishes it. Must be nice. You got lucky. Let's see if it lasts. Death by 1,000 quiet cuts. Seneca, who spent years navigating the treacherous politics of Nero's Rome, understood this kind of man completely. He wrote, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you, not those who need you smaller to feel larger." Now here's what I want you to consider. How long have you known this person? And how long have you felt, somewhere underneath the friendship, that you couldn't fully be yourself around them? Because that feeling isn't paranoia. That feeling is data. And the data is pointing somewhere most men aren't ready to look yet. We're halfway through, and the next person on this list is the one nobody warns you about. In fact, most men defend this person without even realizing what they're defending. Don't go anywhere. 3. The one who loves the old you and resents the new one. This is the one that will cost you the most to hear, because this person loves you. Genuinely. That's not in question, but they love a version of you that no longer exists or shouldn't. The version that was struggling, the version that needed them, the version that hadn't yet figured out what you've started to figure out. And every time you're in their presence, the conversation has a gravitational pull backward, back to old stories, old wounds, old identities you've been quietly shedding like dead skin. They're not doing it to hurt you. They're doing it because your growth makes them uncomfortable. Because if you change, if you actually become the man you're becoming, it forces them to ask questions about their own life they're not ready to answer. Seneca said it plainly: withdraw into yourself as much as you can with those who will make you better. Welcome those who you can make better. But what happens when neither is possible? What happens when someone can't make you better and isn't ready to be made better themselves? That's the question most men avoid for years. And the avoiding, the staying, is costing you something you can see in the mirror every morning but haven't been able to name. We're almost there. Stay with me. For the one who needs you to stay broken. I said I'd come back to the question, why do you keep answering? Here it is. Some people in your life have built their entire relationship with you on a foundation of your need, your struggle, your dependency. You are the project. You are the purpose. And somewhere along the way, without either of you fully realizing it, staying broken became the price of keeping the peace. The moment you start healing, they get uncomfortable. The moment you set a boundary, they call it selfishness. The moment you start choosing yourself, they frame it as abandonment. And because you're a decent man, because you don't want to hurt people, you second-guess yourself. You slow down, you shrink back. Marcus Aurelius watched this dynamic destroy men around him his entire life. And he wrote 7 words that I want you to carry with you after this video ends. What stands in the way becomes the way. 7 words. But here's what he meant, and this is the part most people miss entirely. Sometimes the obstacle isn't a circumstance. Sometimes the obstacle has a name. Sometimes it sits across from you at dinner. Sometimes it's been in your phone contacts for 20 years. And the way forward, the only way forward, requires you to make a decision that feels cruel, but is actually the most compassionate thing you can do for them, and especially for yourself. 5. The one who mistakes your kindness for a lease. There's a particular kind of person who enters your life during a generous moment and never leaves. You helped them once, maybe twice. And somewhere between the first time and now, your kindness quietly became their expectation. Your availability became their entitlement. Your patience became the thing they budget around. They don't ask anymore. They assume. They show up unannounced, not just at your door, but in your decisions, your schedule, your mental space. And when you pull back even slightly, the response is immediate. Guilt, wounded silence, the subtle suggestion that you've changed, said like it's an accusation. Here's what nobody tells you about this dynamic. The moment you allowed kindness to become a contract, the moment you let someone treat your generosity as a given, you stopped being a man in their eyes and became a resource. And resources don't get respected. Resources get used until they run dry. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and still became one of the most psychologically free human beings who ever lived, understood this at a level most men never reach. He said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." But here's the part that cuts deeper. You cannot rejoice in what you have when someone else has made a permanent home in it. Your time, your peace, your energy, these are not infinite. And the man who treats them like they are will wake up one day completely empty, wondering where all the years went. We're almost at the part that ties everything together. Stay with me, because what comes next is the piece most men never get told. 6. The one inside the mirror. This is the one nobody puts on a list. And it's the most important one. Because here's the truth that sits underneath everything we've talked about today. You already knew. You already knew about the chronic complainer. You already knew about the false friend. You already knew about the one who needs you broken, the one who resents your growth, the one who turned your kindness into a lease. You knew. and you stayed anyway. So before you cut anyone off, before you make a single external change, there is one honest question a man must ask himself. And it is the question Marcus Aurelius returned to again and again in the pages of Meditations, not because he was weak, but because he was rigorous. Why have I allowed this? Not to punish yourself, not to sit in guilt, but to understand the part of you that kept the door open, the part that confused loyalty with self-abandonment, the part that believed keeping the peace out there was worth losing the peace in here. Because here's what the Stoics knew that took most men a lifetime to learn. You cannot cut the right people off until you've first made peace with the version of yourself that let them in. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of real strength. And that strength, that quiet, settled, unshakable strength, is what other people see when a man walks into a room and every head turns. Not his age, not his clothes, not his money, his peace. That's what they're responding to. That's what they can't look away from. And that, finally, is what we've been building toward this entire time. So let's bring this full circle back to that 71-year-old man. You want to know what he actually meant when he said, "I stopped keeping company that costs me." He didn't mean he became cold. He didn't mean he stopped caring about people. He didn't cut everyone off and disappear into isolation. He meant he got honest, brutally, quietly, finally honest, about the difference between the people who were adding to his life and the people who were subtracting from it. And one by one, with no drama, no explanation owed to anyone, he started making different choices about who got access to his time, his energy, and his peace. And here's what happened. He slept better. He moved differently. The tension he'd carried in his jaw, his shoulders, his chest, tension so familiar he'd stopped noticing it, began to release. His mind got quieter. His eyes got clearer. People started asking him what his secret was. This is what the Stoics understood that we've forgotten. Your body is not just a biological machine. It is a record of every relationship you've ever stayed in too long, every conversation that drained you, every person you kept out of guilt while quietly losing yourself in the process. And it is also capable of something remarkable, of beginning to recover the moment you make the right decision. Not tomorrow, not when the time is right, now. Because Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, sat alone in his tent and wrote these words for himself. It is not death that a man should fear. He should fear never beginning to live. You have lived long enough to know which people in your life have been standing between you and that. Now you know what to do. If this reached something in you, share it with a man who needs to hear it. And if you want more of this, subscribe, because we're just getting started.